again.
Well, but one of the, I mean, here's an irony. Here's an irony that Germany's worked so hard since 1945 to build up a good relationship, and yet now it's actually being resented, as you know, by the Greeks and the Italians, and there's a big north-south problem in Europe. But if Germany could be seen to be the champion of jobs in Europe and to point out that Barnier, Juncker, Tajani, Verhofstadt, these are the people standing in the way of a sensible trade deal, then I think if my visit can do two things: one, to show some personal support for you, which is why I'm here, but two, to at least get some debate going.
That would be something.
That would be something.
Let's shift a little bit to Germany and look towards Germany. What is the German impact for Brexit? Or could put the question in the other way, what has the migration issue been influenced? Or how has the migration influenced the Brexit decision? As we all know, that Merkel is responsible for that one.
Do you know something? I was with a guy called David Blunkett the other day. He was the British Home Secretary during the Tony Blair years. And I was with Blunkett and we were talking. And Blunkett said, Nigel, he said, in the Brexit campaign, he said, I think Mrs. Merkel was your greatest ally. And I think what the British saw was Merkel making a decision of historically bad proportions and, frankly, wholly irresponsible. I mean, whichever way you look at what Merkel did, it was wholly irresponsible. Firstly, in terms of how can that sheer number of people coming into a country, how can you hope to integrate them? It's going to take, 10 years, 20 years, I don't know. But also in terms of terrorism. When ISIS say they're going to use these routes to put the bad guys into Europe, but when they say it, we kind of probably ought to believe what they're saying. So I think the Brits saw this and said, we're outside Schengen, we've got some degree of short-term protection, but ultimately all these people coming in will all get European passports one day.
And then they're in.
And then they're in. And I think it was a major factor. It was a major factor in terms of Brexit, was Merkel's mistake.
So this is why you're very grateful for Merkel, more than we are.
In a very ironic way. In a very ironic way, yes. I mean, look, no one doubts. I don't doubt, in many ways, that there is a large degree of economic competence and surety about Merkel. During the crisis, back in 2008, the reason that Germany rose to become the strongest force in the European project is that, frankly, the people that were running it, and in those days it was people like Mr. Barroso, the former Portuguese communist, they were so low caliber that she did rise through that and showed, in a crisis, a degree of economic surety. However, with her warm, loving embrace of the euro, I think at some point down the road, Germany is going to be in for a very terrible shock. Because whilst you may be the richest in Europe, and whilst you may enjoy, comparatively good terms of trade with the rest of Europe, particularly good with us, the point is that at some point there could be a bust, and it could come in Italy or a country like that. And at some point in time, the Germans are going to be owed a very, very large sum of money by Mediterranean countries that in the end won't be able to pay it. So, as I say, on the face of it, Mrs. Merkel has been very competent. I wonder in 10 years' time what people will really think.
Yeah, I think we will have that debate starting as of from now, maybe, hopefully. There's one other point I wanted to touch is talking about Germany and German history. At school, what even the smallest learn already is that the European Union means basically peace and fortune and everything like that. And so if you're a good German, you have to be in favor of the European Union. Do you think that for the reason of our history, we're forced to stick to the European Union? We have to support it because of German's history?
Well, Germany has a difficult relationship with its modern history for fairly obvious and straightforward reasons. But I think you have to, at some point in time, to examine what that proposition means, that the European Union means peace. Well, does it mean that it stopped Germany invading again across the Rhine? Was post-1945 Germany going to be a military threat to anybody? No. in a sense, it's quite an insulting proposition, isn't it? It's actually saying we have to have this European Union to protect Germany from itself. And I think it's a nonsense. I don't think there is zero prospect of Germany being an aggressive nation post-1945. Also, I would point people to that thinking that took place in 1920 with regards to the Balkans. You know, here we had a whole series of small states battling with each other for territory, shooting an archduke, leading to a catastrophic chain of events. And everybody in 1920, we've got the solution. What we'll do is we'll take away their national identities, we'll put them all together, we'll give them one currency, one leader, one flag, one anthem, one police force, one army, we'll call it Yugoslavia, it'll be peace forever. Well, you know, in the last 25 years...
Didn't really work out.
It's broken down with catastrophic consequences. And I think the important thing for people to really understand is this, that mature democratic nation states never go to war with each other, never go to war with each other. It's where there is an absence of democracy or a breakdown of democracy that these things go wrong. And so if there is a lesson, if there's a real lesson to be drawn for all of us from what's happened in the last 150 years, it is that provided states are controlled by the people and the leaders can be sacked at the next election, that actually is the recipe for Europe going forward and ultimately for peace.
Yeah. Let's shift again and shortly talk about UKIP. So UKIP started off in 1993, years ago. Can you tell me a bit about the beginning? What was the biggest problem? Do you remember those days?
Oh, remember them? I was in the room. I mean, I was there when we founded it. I mean, I was the youngest person in the room by 20 years, I think, and I was the baby, you know. And, well, obviously, we have an electoral system in the United Kingdom that makes it just almost impossible for parties to come into politics and break through. We've had, over the last few decades, hundreds of attempts to set up new parties, and they've all failed. So the early days of UKIP really were very much the triumph of optimism over reality. The difficulties were, our difficulties, quite interesting actually, there is a bit of a parallel to the way the AFD got started, in that the first leader that we chose was a university professor. And he's a clever bloke, and he could write good articles and give good lectures, but you know, if you asked him to boil an egg, he probably wouldn't know what he was doing. He wasn't very practical. So, excuse me, we struggled with that. We found that hard. And I think, like all new political movements, you know, you go through a series of splits and difficulties. And so it was hard. It took a very long time to get off the ground. But here's the delicious irony. The delicious irony is the way that UKIP did get off the ground was in elections to the European Parliament.
Yeah, that's the irony of history.
Because they were the first set of elections contested with a degree.
And it has a different system. So
it's a proportional system.
You know, that makes a difference.
And it's funny, you know, I mean, I'm looking at your party's prospects in these elections, and it's very significant that we're going to get, you know, a voice of criticism and scepticism is going to get into the Bundestag with a good number of seats. And there was us, UKIP, the last general election. How many seats do you have in there? 4 million votes.
4 million, 0 seats.
And 1 seat. You know. So it's been very difficult. Yeah. Very, very difficult. But as I say, ironically, the European system...
You succeeded.
We succeeded. And what we did was we shifted the centre of gravity of the national debate. We took subjects that nobody would talk about. We took subjects that people thought it was embarrassing to talk about or even extreme to talk about. And we took those subjects and we put them right at the centre of the national debate. And if I, you know, quite honestly, if I look back on that, it was quite an achievement. It wasn't easy, because when you take on the establishment, you know, they come at you very viciously. It's been at times very nasty, but hey, it's been worth it.
Time is nasty, so this is my last question. You're known that you're close to Donald Trump. Tell us, what is his current situation? Where is he in?
Well, Trump was elected making a series of promises, and he wants to do his best to fulfill that series of promises. The difficulty is that whatever he does, he gets obstructed by judges, he gets obstructed by members of his own party in Congress, and I think in many ways it's been very frustrating for him. Very, very frustrating for him. You know, I know this guy well enough to tell you that he absolutely wants to hold faith with his electorate. Isn't it refreshing? A politician who actually wants to do what he was elected to do. I mean, wow. I tell you what, he's one tough guy. He's one very, very tough guy. And you can read wall-to-wall criticism of him in the media or whatever it is, but he will do what he thinks is right. Ultimately, he is going to need to get some support from his own party. There are some fences, I think, there that do need to be mended. I will say this to you, I think the most important thing now for Trump is that he gets tax reform through Congress. And if he does that, and if tens of billions of dollars flow back into America, which are sitting overseas, he'll be able then to do his infrastructure program. You know, frankly, I think, given the opposition that's been shown to him, I think he's doing remarkably well.
Thanks a lot, Nigel.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Und vielen Dank Ihnen fürs Zuschauen. Ich hoffe, Sie haben einige Erkenntnisse mitgenommen und wir freuen uns auf die nächste Ausgabe von Ein anderer Blick. Vielen Dank.